I hope all of you enjoyed the block party last night. That was pretty fun, huh? Yeah, it was good. And a big thank you to Emily Downey and the Woodford County Chamber of Commerce for putting that on for us last night. They did a really good job. The band from Hazard did a great job too. They were fantastic. So welcome to day 2 of the HEI 2021 President's Conference presented by Barnes & Noble College. Today and tomorrow, we will be here in the Ann Hart Reynolds Center located on this beautiful Midway University campus. Midway University is just one of the 18 independent colleges and universities in Kentucky. These institutions have joined together under the umbrella of the Association of Independent Kentucky Colleges and Universities, or ACU, which has a stated mission to advance the interest of Kentucky's independent private nonprofit colleges and universities by promoting post-secondary affordability and student success through policy advocacies, strategic partnerships, and community buy-in. To tell us a little bit more about ACU and to bring us a welcome on behalf of the member institutions, I'd like to introduce ACU's president, Dr. O.J. Olika.
Well, thank you, Jay, for that kind introduction, and thank you, everybody, for being here today. It has been a while since I've been in undergrad, not too long since I was in grad school, but there's something interesting that even the presidents and senior leaders of colleges and universities still sit in the back. I think that's pretty funny as we get started this morning. But I just want to welcome you all. Of course, this is Midway University, one of our institutions of AQ's 19. AQ, IQ, it's like tomato, tomato, however you say it. Just don't say anything negative in front or after. But all our institutions are a lot like Midway, but also very different than Midway, in the sense that we're each independent. The thing that brings us together is what Jay already said. We care about making sure that our students get a quality education, as do each of you. And that's the thing that I think that is important to understand as we continue in our conference over the next couple days. And that is the focus and the center of my greetings. I got started in this role in December of 2019, the before times, as they're often called these days. But what I realized was that there was nothing more important that I could do as I talked to all my presidents those first few months than building relationships. In higher education, the name of the game is to learn a little bit from one institution, share what you learned with the next institution that you go to, and so on and so forth. Higher education is a place where students learn, but also where the faculty and the staff learn as well. The entire process itself is iterative. A couple things that we learned over the past year and a half was, one, we're all in this together with regard to our health, but also we're all in this together with regard to our social health. You have public health and social health, as we've been discovering the past little bit, and of course the public health deals with COVID. We've all had our different responses. We all are still responding. But what I would encourage you all to do today and tomorrow and the time that you have together is learn from one another on this and on leadership. We certainly have within our association 18 institutions tackling this problem in 18 different ways, each learning together and from one another in an iterative way. The other aspect of what we've learned is our social health, as we in higher education have dealt with social unrest and racial justice in the wake of George Floyd in Minnesota, Breonna Taylor here in Kentucky. We have found that it is more important now than ever to come together to figure out how to solve our problems and challenges as leaders within higher education. Because not only are we the leaders of today, but by and large you all are creating the leaders of tomorrow, but also the culture of tomorrow. We have a responsibility. And so here I would just like to say in closing, again, thank you all for being here today. Thank you for being at Midway University, and I hope you enjoy your time in Kentucky. And if this is your first time, welcome to the greatest Commonwealth. There are 4, ours is the best. And I hope you make sure to come back. Again, thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, O.J. He's a great leader. I'm proud to call him my friend, and glad he could be with us this morning to bring a greeting. I'd like to remind those of you here, if you're interested in taking a short walking tour of the Midway University campus today at the end of our last session, we will have an individual here, Ellen Gregory, from their student services side, who will be available to give you a walking tour. I'll ask you to commit to that at the afternoon keynote session so they'll know how many people to have in the tour. But we appreciate that. I also mentioned earlier that Barnes & Noble College was our conference presenting sponsor. To tell you a little bit more about Barnes & Noble College, we have with us Miss Emily Conley, who's going to lead us through that. So, Emily?
Thank you, Dr. Fox. Hello, everyone, and my name is Emily Conley, and I'm with Barnes & Noble College, and I'm thrilled to be here today to talk to you guys a little bit more about what we do at Barnes & Noble College. At BNC, we strive to provide modern innovation with our academic solutions, and we have two basic programs. Our flagship program that we pioneered here at KCTCS is our first day program that allows students to have access to materials by course on the first day of class. We also have a first day complete program, which is a new innovative program that really allows us to align our initiatives with those of the universities that we serve, breaking down barriers, making sure that college students have access to materials on the first day of class no matter what. With this program is our equitable access. We want to make sure that all students are given the opportunity to have materials no matter what their socioeconomic or financial backgrounds are. So with that, I'm very excited to talk to you today about First Aid Complete. As you can see, where's our clicker? As you can see from the stats behind me, we have a lot of stats about the outcomes of our program, but more importantly, we hear from our partner schools and students over and over again just how impactful this program is and how impactful the outcomes are for students, and it reduces their stress. So with that, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker. To her fans, Miss Dr. Mary Landon Darden is known as a futurist. According to Webster Dictionary, a futurist is a person who studies the future and makes predictions about it based on current trends. I think that after this morning's presentation, you will understand why Dr. Darden is deserving of that title. Dr. Darden is also an author who loves research. In fact, in 2 of her books, she has used her thorough research skills to unveil trends that threaten the survival of some colleges while also chronicling the best practices of other colleges who are thriving. In her first book, Beyond 2020, Envisioning the Future of Universities in America, Darden lays out the challenges faced by higher education leaders and predicts that without change, some institutions could cease to exist by 2020. That book was written in 2009. Never did we all imagine that many of Darden's predictions would come true in the decades between 2010 and 2020. But Mary didn't want to just be a purveyor of doom and gloom. So she sought out leaders who were trying different and entrepreneurial things to help their institutions not only survive the challenges, but also thrive in this chaotic higher education world. The result was Mary's current book, Entrepreneuring the Future of Higher Education, Radical Transformation in Times of Profound Change. As the introduction to the book states, this is a proactive, hands-on approach to existing and emerging changes in higher education. To put it simply, Mary's second book has given us the blueprint of how to move higher education forward. This morning, we are honored to have with us the former college faculty member, administrator, prolific researcher, gifted author, and respected futurist. Would you join me in welcoming the President of Higher Education Innovation and our morning's keynote speaker, Dr. Mary Landon Darden.
Thank you, Emily. Good morning. Y'all doing well? Good. I'm feeling very grateful. I'm feeling grateful to be back in person, grateful to be with you all, grateful for this wonderful place and for the beautiful weather, and I hope you are feeling that gratitude too. It's a great time. After hearing the Lieutenant Governor yesterday, who so eloquently spoke about education, and isn't it exciting to see politicians who are excited about the future of higher education? I just loved it. I thought back at some of our women leaders and politicians in Texas, and we had some great ones. I live in Texas, Waco, Texas, and Ann Richards was one of the greats. She was a governor, but one of the things that was great about Ann Richards, besides that she could get things done, was she was hilarious. She was so funny. And the state legislature in Texas was debating about the concealed handgun issue when she was governor. And they were having all these arguments and said, well, you know, a woman would feel a whole lot better if she had a gun in her purse. And Ann Richards got up to spoke and she said, now look, y'all, you know I'm not prejudiced, but there isn't a woman alive that could find a gun in her purse. But a great politician and a big believer in education. So today we're going to talk about research, what we found, what's fundamental and foundational about the future and about future success. And I'm going to hope to save a little time for some questions at the end. No guarantee, but we'll work on it. You all have heard of Clayton Christensen from Harvard and his prediction that, and this was a while back, a few years back, he said that in 15 years, half of all the colleges in the United States would close. Well, they modified that a little bit a few years later, but there still is a lot of doom and gloom in that. There are a lot of people that are dancing in the dragon's jaws as we speak. They don't know if there's going to be another year. They don't know if they have enough money to stay open. And so we're looking at a lot of mergers, a lot of closings. You've seen them. We see them every week. We see a college close. So we need to be proactive and do something to prevent that. The United States is still #1 in the world in higher education. And among the reasons why they are #1 still is because of the scope of what we do, the depth and the breadth and the diversity. So many countries have kind of cookie-cutter universities that kind of cover all the bases. And we have a lot of diversity and a lot of accessibility. We have specializations in technology and in the arts and in agriculture and in music and all kinds of things. We have schools that just do music and do it very, very well. We have a variety of types of institutions, the faith-based, the HBCUs, the women's colleges, which we see women's colleges closing and just evaporating from the surface of the earth. I went to a women's college. I went to Sweetbriar College, and some of you probably know the story about Sweetbriar. They voted to close in 2015, and the alumni got together, raised $36 million in 3 months, went to court, got control of the university, took it over, reimagined it, opened it back up, and now they have the largest enrollment that they've had in 10 years. They're making it. One of the things, I wasn't one of the ringleaders that really went to court and did all that. They asked me what I thought. They said, what do we need to do? And since you won't be able to hear Dr. Wu say this today, I said to them, well, for one thing, you have 3,500 acres on the edge of the Shenandoah Valley, on the edge of the Blue Ridge Mountains, and you need to use that. Why don't you use your land? So they planted a vineyard, and they're going to be making wine. And they have apiaries, and they're going to be making honey. They are making honey. And they're doing agriculture, greenhouses, and growing some of their own food. And they're moving forward, and what they're doing is they're increasing their revenue streams. The structure of independent private and public institutions is a great strength for us. And also the focus of having things like community college with the wonderful access that they provide. We set a model for the world in this, and fortunately many people are emulating us. So we go from the community college to the research ones. And isn't that wonderful that we can have that scope? And so the access in the United States, we are one of 3 in the world that allow 60% access to higher education. The US, Australia, and Canada. In the rest of the world, it's much less. Even in the UK, it's just 30%, and in Africa, it is 8%. Okay. We're going to talk a little bit, tiny bit about evolution, because this is an evolutionary process. It's survival of the fittest, right? But by survival of the fittest, it really isn't the fittest, it's really the most adaptable. Because adaptability allows us to survive. And one concept that I think you all know in organizational change is change equals stability. So if you're not changing, you are unstable. You are ripe for disruption. And so failure to change equals instability. And that's something that we need to embrace and get ready to radically change. Okay, to survive or not to survive external disruption, like a meteor falling from the sky, the dinosaurs could not adapt. But birds, they were also dinosaurs, they did adapt. So the only dinosaurs to survive were the ones that could fly. They could eat a number of different food sources. They could travel from one sort of climate to another. That could be flexible enough to change their environment. So a lot of institutions today are kind of like dinosaurs. They really haven't changed much. And they're in danger of extinction. And we need to do something about that. Fortunately, we're more able to change an institution than we were a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Okay, this is just a model. This isn't based on statistics. This is just kind of to give you a picture of, we started higher education in this country in 1636. And then came along eventually the Industrial Revolution, and it kind of changed things. We started having engineering and all kinds of different things that weren't in the trivium and the quadrivium when they started the institution, which was Harvard, and then William and Mary. And then the internet. Oh my gosh, most of us remember the internet hitting and how drastically that changed everything. And so today, we have an even bigger change. We are challenged in ways, we've adapted somewhat to the internet, but now we're realizing that we need to change the whole concept of who and what we are in so many ways. And I like to use a phrase or a term from a friend of mine, Gordon Friedman, who calls this a time of people tech. It's a great concept. It is a time of people tech. We have to have people that can lead the change that's necessary. And that's why we do what we do. This is an example of some disruption. In 2002, you can see where Blockbuster was a $6 billion industry. And if you notice this timeline, it was 10 years. 10 years, and Netflix came in at 0 and disrupted them. They went bankrupt, and now Netflix at this time was $8 billion. I don't know what it is today, but I know it's way more than $8 billion. So, and of course, they may get disrupted by something that we can't even imagine yet. We could be Blockbuster. I'm just saying. Silicon Valley, there's a lot of places that could disrupt us severely. Okay. So the ongoing survival kind of cycle of entrepreneuring involves self-disruption. We don't need to wait until we're disrupted by someone else. We need to disrupt ourselves. We need to do it radically, we need to do it immediately, and we need to do it strategically. And then it's a cycle, so that we can't just do it once. And that's the problem with higher education, is we sit on our laurels too much. It's been a strength for us over hundreds of years, where we haven't changed much, we haven't been able to be moved greatly, and we've been stable, go figure. But now we have got to start self-disrupting. It's long overdue. Once we do, we can identify the needed change. We need to assess everything to do that. So assessment is critical. You can't know where you're going to go on a map until you know where you are. When you put up Google Maps, you have to do a destination. You put where you are and where you're going. So where are we? We have to assess to find that out. And then we identify the needs, the things that need to be changed. We go in and do the critical research and the consulting or the coaching or whatever it is that we need to make those changes. Then we develop and test, we implement, and then we go back to assess it again. And we should do that on a regular basis and have a timetable for assessment. So a lot of people ask me what entrepreneuring is. And I think this is the only slide I'm going to read for you. Entrepreneuring is a combination of mission-based, creative, holistic, systematic, strategic, and continuing process-oriented initiatives, frequently involving high levels of innovation, change, and risk in order to achieve greatly improved institutional, economic, operational, social, and cultural environments through often bold actions of individuals and/or groups of individuals within the institution. I know that's a long definition, but it's all important. And so that was the reason behind the book. I wanted to spend my life in non-traditional education, and I researched it, I tried things, I tested things, I stepped out of the box, I stepped out of the room on occasion. And I wanted to share what I had learned from my research and from my work. So one of the things that is interesting is, and it's a little funny, is that in America, institutions are fighting over the same population of 18 to 22-year-old students, the traditional group of students, right? Well, they are only 15% of the current market, and they're shrinking. The non-traditional group, which is the 22 up, the working full-time, has a family, various other things, that is the vast majority of our market. And we're not doing a great job of reaching out to them. So a lot of people are concerned that with that 15% they're looking at, there are not enough students out there for us to build our enrollment. And in fact, according to STATMATS, that 52% of all Americans want to earn a degree or they want to earn another degree, 52%. I demonstrated this with one of my new admissions counselors when I was a campus dean. I took her out and I said, okay, I'm just going to walk up to somebody in the parking lot, and I did. And I said, excuse me, I said, have you ever thought about getting a degree? And she said, well, yes, I started school, and she told me this whole story and how she really wanted to go back and get her bachelor's degree and her MBA. And I thought, good, I hit the 52% right there. First time off the bat, so it really made an impression on her. Most people that you run into are looking at getting another degree. All right, so if you look at the numbers on that, if you look at the population in America, at the time I did this, was 328 million. That's 170 million prospective students. If you do the math, that's 32,000 prospective students per institution in the United States. There are enough students out there. We just have to find them, connect with them, get them in our schools. So how do we do that? Well, there's a long explanation for that. So one thing I want to talk about before we get into all of that is the financial aspect, because finances are the number one reason why institutions close. Now, it's not that simple. There's a lot of underlying reasons why financial issues exist. It's not just because we don't have enough money in the bank, but why don't we have enough money in the bank? And one of the biggest problems is that we have traditionally rested on the two legs of the stool that every institution has, and that's donors and tuition, right? Everybody has those two legs, whether they're strong or not. And so that was enough. For hundreds of years, that was enough. It is not anymore. Even the state institutions who have had state support or any federal support that's come in, any kind of tax money that's coming to support institutions, it's a little nebulous. Okay, we can't really count on it. They cut every year. It seems like they cut and cut and cut. And so what we've got to do is we've got to increase the number of our revenue streams, the depth of them, and we need to increase the number of legs on our financial stool. Now, this graphic piece of art up here is a really good argument for why I should never become a graphic artist, okay? So, but you can read what the legs are. Some of them you're very familiar with. You know, continuing education, workforce training, partnerships, investments, institutes, intellectual property grants, patents, other endowments. Those are all fund sources. Your institutes can make a profit. I mean, they can bring you money, and they can bring you a lot of money. Look at Stanford University as an example. They do an outstanding job with their institutes. So be thinking about revenue sources, revenue generating, because someday college is going to be free. Someday. I've been saying this for a long time. Someday it is. And now we have pending legislation that might start making community colleges become free. Nothing's a done deal, but there are actually institutions that are free in the United States right now. There are more now than there have been in the past. All right, barriers to success. And you can read these. I'm getting my little timer up here so I make sure I don't go over. Okay, the number one barrier for institutions for success is a lack of prepared leadership, okay? And we can't lead like we used to. We can't just manage like we did 100 years ago. It used to be kind of the same kind of thing of passing the baton and managing the institution. In days of radical change, and needed radical change, we cannot do that anymore. We have to learn how to prepare our leaders of our institutions so that they can do the radical change, they can lead the radical change that is needed to buoy up their institution, to strengthen it, and to make it thrive forever, hopefully. The financial burdens and lack of funding are another huge barrier, which we've discussed. Organizational and cultural issues. Wow, it's a big one. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Inadequate customer service, and yes, I said customer, and a lot of faculty think that's a dirty word, but it's not. You know, if we don't take care of our students and prospective students, there's somebody out there waiting to do it right now. Lack of relevancy, and this is my big pet peeve, lack of relevancy in our programs. We're going to talk about relevancy. Fear. And I think fear is one of the hugest barriers for, is hugest a word? Anyway, barriers for students. And, you know, a study just came out last week that said it's money. Well, yes, but in my research, which is pretty much all qualitative, fear is the greatest one. The fear of being able to afford it is number one on the fear list. So money is the biggest one. But then it's fear, am I going to impact my job? Is my family going to be able to survive this? You know, do I have time to do this? Will my health, you know, goes on and on. The disconnects. You know, we have so many disconnects. We're isolated. We're not only in a silo as the academy, we have silos within the silo. And it's splitting us apart. It's keeping us from doing the necessary work that needs to be done. Okay, so number one, and foundational. Then the foundation for success is the right prepared leadership. That is essential. If you don't have that, we've tried doing other things with institutions where we came in from the side and did things. If you don't have that buy-in and knowledge and understanding from the leadership, it isn't going to fly. It's just not going to fly. So we start with the presidents and the vice presidents, basically. We help them prepare to be entrepreneurial leaders. And it's essential that, and of course the book has a lot of tools in it. It's a very practical approach. But we have to find the right leaders and train them to do the necessary things. Second is your mission. How long has it been since you revisited the mission for your institution? Is it still relevant? Is it still your guiding star? Because it needs to be. So you may need to revisit it, rewrite it, and make sure that everybody knows what that is and they live and breathe it. I know at NASA, I think it's NASA, their mission is to go to Mars. What's your mission? To put a person on Mars. That's it. And they all know it. Even the custodians know it. Okay. Financial depth and diversity we have talked about, but how do we build those legs on the stool? Well, it's through partnerships, it's through working with business and industry, working with government, trying to find out what is needed. One of our board members, Charlie Boyd, he traveled with Bill Gates. He and Bill Gates traveled together in the 70s with Microsoft. And he said that he actually became a vice president for Texas Instruments and had 6,000 reports. And he said one of our greatest needs was training. We desperately needed training. So I went to the community college in the area and I begged them and said, can you do this? We'll pay you well. We need this kind of training. And they looked at it and they said, I don't think we can do that. And what a shame, so we have to be proactive, reaching out, making that connection with business and industry, and asking the question, what do you need? What can we do for you? All right, so this is the ongoing innovation and entrepreneurship kind of model, and you see where, it isn't an easy process, folks, and I'm not going to lie to you, but in the beginning, you see things coming, you see the disruption happening, and then you're resisting, and chaos happens. You can see the model here, but eventually you get out again, and then you can start moving up. Tweaks and cuts will no longer do it. For centuries, we would cut the budget 10%, we would do tweaks here and there. Will not cut it anymore. We have to have seriously radical transformation. No more business as usual, and we need to think less as the ivory tower and more like Silicon Valley. Okay? We have to do that. If we don't, Silicon Valley may disrupt us. Okay. So another one, relevance of education, and this is, if you take nothing else away today, take this away. Are we relevant? Are we preparing our students for careers, for income, for life, for success, for fulfillment? Are we doing that and doing that successfully? Are we connecting the dots to get them from A to Z? If we're not, we really have to examine our relevance. Our programs, getting people jobs where they can pay off their student debt. If they are not, we need to re-examine our relevance. We cannot keep putting people out with degrees. Now, a lot of people have asked me, this is the big question I get, so you think we need to get rid of critical thinking and all this stuff and just do job preparation? No. I don't. And you heard from the panel last night that one of the things they needed, besides the skills, is they needed the life skills, too, from people. They needed people that could communicate, could work as a team. So it's not that we're giving one up for another. It's we're adding two. It's a both and. So we have to be able to do both the critical thinking, the communication skills, all of that, and we have to prepare for a job at the end. All right. Student debt is, the reason we have a student debt problem, I believe, is because we have not connected people well enough to the workforce, and we need to do that better. Cultural health, including diversity, equity, and inclusion. And yesterday, when I did the research roundtable, somebody from Ivy Tech said, we don't use inclusion anymore. We use belonging. And I thought, isn't that wonderful? Because you can include somebody, but it doesn't mean you embrace them. So belonging is a wonderful word. How about diversity, equity, and belonging? I like that. I like that a whole lot. And thank you for sharing that yesterday. We have done a terrible job of this. We have done a terrible job. And how can we expect society to embrace diversity, equity, inclusion, or belonging if we've done such a poor job? So, first thing we've got to do is get that right in the academy. We need to make it a priority. We need to make it part of our mission to do this. And then we can't just hire a diversity officer and say, "Would you fix this for me?" No, you have to, through history, change has seldom happened through altruism. It's happened because it had to. That's why we had to have the civil rights movement and all the different radical changes in the past. We've been forced to make the change. And so the leadership of the institution needs to make sure that this happens. It needs to be a priority. It needs to be part of the mission. All right. High-functioning organizational operation that focuses on students. I love this little cartoon. If you want to be noticed, ring the bell. I mean, how many times have we seen something like that? We need to have people at our front desk that are happy and waiting for people to come in and greeting them and making them feel at home like we really care about you. You know what? I'm here because of you. You are the reason we exist, and that needs to show. That needs to show in every building people walk into. And I'm telling you, I've visited enough institutions to know that it's really not the norm, and it needs to be. Again, assessment. I keep coming back to assessment because without regularly going back and re-looking at what we're doing and reassessing according to today, not yesterday or a year ago or 100 years ago, today, what are we doing? What do we need to be doing? So, I went into a college in South Texas, which is in one of the fastest growing communities in the nation. I visited a community college and did an assessment of their student services. They said, "We don't know what's wrong. We have been growing at 0.5% a year for the past 2 or 3 decades. We don't know why." So I spent 3 days doing comprehensive qualitative study with focus groups and interviews and a SWOT analysis. I went back, crunched it all, and came back a month later and I said, "This is what's going on." The top 3 out of my top 10 recommendations were all in technology. They had 13-year-old computers in their admissions lounge area that people would wait in line for hours. Prospective students would wait in line for hours. They'd get there, computer would crash. It would take 15 minutes for it to reboot. They were already mad because they'd been in line for an hour. And they weren't updating their software. And so I said, first of all, you've got to have all new computers now. And you've got to have software that updates every day. You've got to have all these tools, and this president wrote a check right there, and they fixed all that. And then they went down, and over the year, they made the other 7 recommendations. And by the next fall, they increased their enrollment by 37%. So if you find out what's going wrong or what you need, and you fix it, then you can start having a pathway to success. Recruiting and admissions is one of the most troubled areas that I've seen in higher education. We don't get it, and I'll tell you something. I studied the for-profits, and although I don't agree with everything that they do and all their methods, they get it, and they are doing some really incredible things. First of all, it's got to be relational, okay? It's got to be something where you are responsive, and I want you to, another word to embrace is urgency. You can't just get an inquiry and wait a week or 2 to respond to it, because you've already lost that student. And the other thing is you've got to track them. Everybody should have a CRM. a customer relationship management electronic tool that you can track everybody exactly where they are, when they are, and other people in the institution can look in there and say, okay, yes, I see this, I need to update it with this so that everybody else sees it. And what we have saying at HEI, a student who is not tracked is a student lost. And I've known of institutions or systems that have had around 100,000 inquiries, and within a year only 10,000 were followed up on. They all need to be followed up on, and they need to be followed up on now. Let me make sure yeah. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit more about student services because we have got to really understand what some of the basic components are. Okay, we've got to understand the number one barrier, which is fear for students. Their financial ability to succeed, their family and career. We need to understand that. We need to be compassionate about it and help as much as we can. We need to understand that the decision time to go to a college from when a student used to think about college and now, it used to be years. You know, your junior year or sophomore year, you'd write off to college and get those little brochures. Some of you are too young to know this, but anyway. And you get the brochures, you look them over, and then you do your application and your essay, and you send it in, and you wait months and months and months and months to hear whether you got in. Today, when a student decides they're going to college, they decide where they're going to go in less than 10 days on the average, okay? So they get on and they, might write somebody or put in an application, and if they don't hear from somebody pretty quickly, like today or tomorrow, they're going to think, oh, I just didn't get in, or they move on. Or I'll tell you what happens is and this is what I couldn't figure out about some of these schools, for profit schools, that were very expensive, and they weren't well known. I mean, as far as, Ivy League or something like that. And all these students were going to, and one of the biggest institutions in the world was a for-profit that hadn't been around that long, and they were expensive. And I realized it's the recruiters. They're developing a relationship, and people that are in sales know this. People that are in sales know this. They're developing a relationship with those students and trust. They're building trust, and they're getting them in, and they're doing it urgently and immediately, not tomorrow, not next week. They're doing it now. One thing I discovered, and Greg Lehman helped me discover this, when I was in the Baylor Research and Innovation Collaboration and Launch at Baylor. I worked with Greg in his innovation training, and I said, I just can't figure out. Everybody hires admissions counselors, and they expect them to go out and be, outgoing and make connections and build relationships, and they expect them to come in and crunch numbers and do details and all this stuff. And I said, in my experiences, it doesn't work well. And Greg said, is my mic too loud, by the way? No? Okay. Greg said, well, business has known this forever. They aren't the same person. You have your hunters and you have your farmers. Your hunters are your recruiters. They're the ones that get out there and they make the relationship and they build everything. And then you've got to have a farmer back home who's going to enter the data and manage the CRM and get everything, updated for them. And then you've got a team. Then you've got a team that works. And so what I started doing was I started giving a sales test to when I needed a hunter on my admissions team, a recruiter. I gave them a sales test, and it worked, like a charm, okay? Don't stick them in a corner and expect them to data enter, because that ain't gonna work, but they can go out and sell like crazy, and it is sales. You're not selling somebody something they don't want, you're selling them something they want, and you're helping them get there. Okay, so we've got to connect the dots. We've got to look at, what are our students' interests? And what are their gifts and talents? And where is that a fit for a program in our college? And then once they get into that and they do well, what's a job they can go into? And we need to be paving those pathways all along. We need to be connecting with business and industry, just like we heard about yesterday on our panel, and saying, okay, these are some jobs you're going to get to, let's see, are you a fit? Are you an introvert, extrovert? I actually developed an assessment, a personal assessment, that my students could take to kind of get to know themselves a little bit, to know what kind of person they are, what they like, what brought them joy, what was their calling, and then looked at what might be a field that you would be happy in, connect that, and then connect to the jobs. I want to talk about third-party recruiting, and it can work sometimes. I've used it before. As a matter of fact, we were a third-party recruiter when I first started HEI. But they're expensive, and it's kind of a crutch in a way. It's not transforming your institution, it's outsourcing. They charge anywhere from 27% of your gross tuition to, what's the top one? I forgot, 70%. 70%. And I know a college that just went under because they were paying 70% to a recruiter. Micro-target marketing, when I first became a campus dean at a university in San Antonio, I looked at my marketing budget and thought, oh my God, you know, this is less than what I had when I was a coordinator at the community college. And so I thought, what am I going to do with that? You know, I felt like if I were marketing in a city of 2 million people, which was San Antonio, it was like going out in the parking lot with a blindfold on and a shotgun, shooting up in the air and expecting enough dove to fall out of the sky to feed us for a year. Well, you know, that's not going to happen. So I had to figure out how to sniper hunt. And so what I started doing was I started building relationships with business and industry within the community. And that allowed me to go out and actually recruit on site. Another problem with admissions was the messaging. I actually did one research study where a parent, a student, and a faculty member told me that the welcome letter to the institution sounded more like a rejection letter. And then I asked one of our groups of, you know, in our president is entrepreneur training workshops, I said, have any of y'all read your messaging to students? Pretty much no. So a lot of them went back and said, I want to see all the messaging. It's going to students. It needs to be warm and fuzzy. It needs to be welcoming. It needs to let them know that you want to talk to them. So many of them were bold capital letters in red, highlighted in yellow, warning, warning, you're going to be expelled if you blah, blah, blah. And I mean, that is not the way to build trust. Okay. Disaster relief plan. You know, we've all had disaster relief plans. Those old plans aren't good enough anymore. Today, we live in a day where we have multiple disasters. What if you have a hurricane and a pandemic? And your hurricane and disaster instructions say you should go get in these small underground rooms, right? Like sardine cans. Well, what does that do to your pandemic? So we have to look at disaster relief plans that incorporate multiple disasters at the same time. A fire, like in California, a tornado, an earthquake. Okay, other important considerations are niches. And it's really, really essential. We can't be all things to everyone anymore. We need to develop on our strengths. What are we good at? And one example I always use, you heard them last night, is the Bluegrass Institute that is in the KCTCS system. They have a world-renowned niche right there. They have people from Japan coming over and registering for that program. Build on your strengths. Build on your identity. Don't try to be everything to everyone. We can't do that well. And we're now in a global marketplace. We're no longer just a regional institution. Technology, of course, organizational change, enhanced access globally. Okay. So the niches, you know, we've done these traditional courses and programs forever and ever, where we did try to be most things to everyone within a region. And so now we have to look at those targeted global markets along with the targeted regional and state markets. So try to redefine that. Cut out the things that you know the college down the street does really way better than you do, and you have terrible enrollment. They can go online and take a better program, perhaps. Okay, instruction is another area. Now, before the pandemic, more than half of the courses in the United States were delivered online. More than half. What do you think they are now? After the pandemic, that has increased. I don't know the statistic, but I know it's bigger. And so we need to be able to do the online and the hybriding well. We need to do it well. I don't think this is going to change. It's not going to start dropping and decreasing. Maybe we'll have some rises and dips, but it's not going away. And utilizing technology in its new emerging forms. Don't be late to everything. Don't be the last one to come to it. Explore it. Utilize it. Learning is no longer just having a faculty member stand up and sharing all their wisdom and the library down the hall. We have the whole world at our fingertips. We have the internet. We have every library in the world at our fingertips. So learning needs to be more curative. We need to teach our students how to know what is good, valid information, how to find it, how to know when something, warning signs, when it's not. How do we look for it, search for it? And we need to do more creative learning, more collaborative learning, experiential learning. These are all wonderful things. As you heard yesterday, when you can take the theory and the actual techniques and go into a lab that day and apply them and build something, build an engine, then you remember it. You remember it. And one reason why I tell stories is because I can do statistics all day long and you'll forget them when you walk out of the room. But stories we remember. And so stories are important. That's actually going to be my next book, is the stories of entrepreneuring. So if you have some good ones, I want to hear from you. Continuous relevancy and quality enhancement. We've talked about that. Access and improving regularly, and then entrepreneuring instruction. So, all right, technology, of course, this is a no-brainer, but the CRM is one I want to emphasize. I was shocked at how many institutions don't even use a CRM. Or if they use one, it's a terrible one. It's so cumbersome, people won't use it. Okay, one thing that you can do to reduce your costs is you can use green energy, okay? I remember I had a chapter in my first book, Beyond 2020, and both my books are also published by the American Council on Education, along with Rowman and Littlefield. And I spoke at the National American Council on Education President's Conference in Washington, D.C. And I got up and talked about turbines and solar panels, roof panels, and tidal energy and all this stuff. And so a president stood up in the group and said, "Do you mean to say that you think I ought to put wind turbines on my campus?" And of course, I wasn't a college president then, all right? And I haven't been. I've never been a college president. Campus dean was my highest position. And I said, "Yes, sir, I do." and so pretty shocked, the group was shocked. 3 years later, and in that group for my talk was the president of the University of North Texas. And 3 years later, I drove by North Texas, and there were 3 wind turbines on their campus. And they were delivering 100% of all the power for all of their new athletic facilities, their football field, their gymnasium, their everything there, 100%, and they had extra to put back on the grid. So look into that. Some of the roof panels, solar panels now, will last 2 to 3 times as long as a normal roof, and most of you know how expensive it is to roof something. And along with that, it produces all the energy for the building and maybe more. So why are we not doing this? We now know that it's more efficient to produce and more cost-effective to produce solar and wind than it is fossil fuel power. And we can do it ourselves. We can do it ourselves. So we use our land, like I talked about at Sweetbriar. Use your land if you have it. It's a real asset. Do zero waste, recycle everything, and risk prevention. How many colleges and universities do we know, like one that I'm very familiar with and live right near, have spent hundreds of millions of dollars settling Title IX lawsuits? And we've got to be able to be better at preventive law. And that's one reason why we incorporate preventive law into our training with leaders, for that very reason. You may not stay out of the courtroom, but you want to try to go as seldom as possible. Okay, when we had our first president's workshop in entrepreneuring, and the first day they got there, I said, what's your number one concern? What's your big worry? What do you want to make sure we talk about while you're here? And they all quietly wrote something down, turned in their paper, and I looked at it. 100% of them said falling enrollment. That's what they were worried about, okay? After we did the 9-week series, I did the same thing. I said, tell me now, what is your biggest worry and concern? And they said, organizational change. Organizational change is essential. It is essential. And we've got to be able to do that and do it well. So we can do that partly through innovation and entrepreneuring. We have to create a positive and affirming environment. We need to embrace DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we need to fully utilize our champions. Presidents, you need to find out and identify your champions, train them, and let them fight for you, and build for you, and create, and innovate, and entrepreneur for that institution, because you cannot do it alone. Okay, so in embracing entrepreneurism, we need to remove the barriers, first of all, as much as we can. We can't remove them all, but we can try. We need to build the relationships, especially with our prospective students. We need to let them know that we care. We need to involve our constituents. Sweetbriar College started bringing in alumni in the summer for 2 weeks to paint the dorm rooms and to plant new flowers in the garden and to renovate. And they had a great time having a reunion. And so, be creative in the things that you do. And partnering with business and industry. And I did several partnerships when I was in San Antonio. One was with Goodwill Industries. We had been doing some stewardship and talking to them about writing excellence, and they finally approached me and said, we just found out that a majority of our leadership coming into the next cycle don't have any college at all, and they're going to be business managers. And they said, what can you do? And I said, well, let's look at a business program. This is downtown San Antonio, way far away from our campus. And so we offered a business degree cohort, met one night a week for 4 hours on a Monday night, right after work, right down the hall from where they all worked, because they had 2 classrooms for their nursing programs. And so we opened to one, it filled, and then we filled a second one. And so for 4 years, just like anybody else going to college, they were able to earn their bachelor's degree from scratch with that program. And most of them graduated, including the second cohort that was waiting in the wings that we started that next session. So, and then with Northside Independent School District, I went and talked to the superintendent and the deputy superintendent. I said, what do you need? And the HR deputy superintendent said, Mary, we do not have enough bilingual, ESL or special ed teachers. We have tried offering $10,000 signing bonuses for bilingual teachers. We've tried going to Mexico and recruiting. We can't do it. We can't get enough people that are qualified. So what we did was we identified a group within their teaching assistants who, would fill and be a match for this, because they already know what this is all about. Often alternative certification people come in and they go, oh my gosh, I had no clue what teaching was going to be. And they leave. So we started training those people up to a bachelor's degree and teaching certificate, and sometimes master's degree with certification in those areas. And within a couple of years, they had filled all their needs. So I'd ask them, how many bilingual people would you hire today? When I asked her that question, if you could, she said 100. I would hire 100 today, but I can't find them. The innovation process, innovation engineering, you're going to get a chance to learn a little bit about that. New ideas and models, University of Southern New Hampshire. This was actually an experiment at Marlborough College. When Kevin Quigley was president, Paul LeBlanc was his, I believe, dean of the business school. And he started an experiment to see how it worked, and it worked. And he took it to University of Southern New Hampshire, and the rest is history. You all know about that. So, innovation, happening, testing it. All right, we already talked about the access, and I just want to make one comment here, that access to higher education, it correlates with quality of life. If you want to look where there's hunger, starvation, and disease, it's where there's low access to higher education. If you want to look at the areas where we're healthiest and strongest, it's where we have high access. Now, this is some good news right here. I had so many parents come up to me at our going, how to go to college, how to pay for college, and they say, is college education really important anymore? Does it matter? Well, this is one thing. This is the 2010 census, which I need to update with the 2020 once I get it. But that's the correlation according to degree and level of income. Professional degrees, notice that. Those are job-specific degrees. And so we know it's still relevant. That chart tells us. Okay, what do we do at HEI? And I'm going to have to, we've got 2 minutes left, thank you, Jay. We do entrepreneuring workshops, which I've already mentioned. We do research and coaching. We do an annual President's Conference, which you're here. We do free blog and online panel discussions. So we do a lot of stuff. We're trying to help, and we're trying to help affordably. That's been one of our goals. Our mission is to transform the future of higher education, and we're busting it to do that. The good news is this is your golden age. This is an opportunity. This is a quote from my book, and we have never had an opportunity like we have right now. And we need to be able to stretch ourselves radically. There goes the alarm. Okay. But the good news is that can be really fun and creative, and we can reimagine and re-envision who we are. The sky is the limit. This is my new book, if anybody's interested in it. And we have no time for questions. I figured I may run out of time, but you can ask me questions throughout the whole conference. I welcome it. And you all have these PowerPoints on your flash drives in your notebooks, so enjoy. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.